Vikings, we're coming to get your gold. This is Matt Easton, Scholar Gladiatoria, and chances are that if you watch this channel, you're interested in Vikings, and you're probably interested in strategy games and wargaming as well. Well, this video is sponsored by Vikings War of Clans. Vikings is a really cool game you can download right now, and it enables you, much like old games of the 90s or the 2000s, like sort of Age of Empires or even Rome Total War. It enables you to build up a small civilization and go and fight your neighbours, in this case your friends. The Vikings game have just gone through a big update, adding things like shamans and other units and new kingdoms as well, so it's a great time to join the action. What's super cool is you can join these in-battle events where there's up to like 1 million players, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. It's a pretty smooth running game, it's got nice clean graphics, kind of cute as well, I've got to say. But the best thing, of course, is you can build up your civilizations and you can collaborate with your friends or you can fight against them. So it's actually a really social game, as well as obviously being connected to warfare and strategy and planning and you know, a little bit like civilization building as well. So go and download the game right now, the link's right below this video, and if you join now using this link here, you get 200 gold to help you build your armies, and also you get a protection shield, which is a useful thing in the game and will give you some advantages. So go and download it now, have lots of fun, maybe I'll see you on there. So as we're talking about Vikings, let's have a little look at the principal weapons used by the Vikings. Now, first up, we have to say that shields are absolutely one of the most important implements, whether you want to call them weapons or not, used in this period. So the fact that shields of various sorts, boss-held shields, and then in the late period, kite shields start to come in, as seen in the Bear Tapestry, but primarily round boss-gripped shields are absolutely intrinsic to warfare across Europe in this period, and they dictate everything. The use of shield walls dictates how combat was carried out, and they also dictate everything else to do with the weapons that are chosen to fight with. But just looking at the weapons of offense, should we say, not to say that shields can't be used in offense as well as defense, but most people, when they think of Vikings, will probably think of things like this, of axes, okay? Particularly for some reason in modern fiction, one-handed axes. Were these used? Absolutely. This is a bearded type of axe, and these were, of course, used alongside shields and are, you know, very effective weapons. They have a lot of percussive force. They're able to oppose shields, hook shields, and overcome the armor of the day. So the principal armor, if people had armor, not everybody had armor in this period, would have been a mail shirt and a helmet. And of course, a mail shirt, you don't necessarily need to cut someone to lay an enormous amount of force into them with an axe. So an axe is a very, very powerful striking weapon. And of course, as well as the one-handed axe, there is the big two-handed so-called Dane Axe. And these were hugely popular. This is a particularly large one, but of various sizes, sometimes with shorter handles than this, but these are famously shown in the Bear Tapestry, used by the housecarls, which are a remnant of Canute's Danish bodyguard. But these two-handed axes absolutely were used in period right the way through the Viking era, as far as we can tell, but perhaps particularly so in the 10th and 11th centuries. And these are the kind of mass shock and awe weapons of the day, but they are nevertheless a specialised weapon and not a mainstream weapon. So a lot of people, when they're talking or thinking about Vikings, will think about swords. And yeah, swords are important, okay? They were clearly symbolically important. People were buried with swords, and influential and powerful and rich leaders spent lots of money on very fancy swords. But remember that a sword is a sidearm, okay, and it's always used with a shield, okay. In the early medieval period, in the Viking era, absolutely, pretty much, unless something had gone horribly wrong, your shield had been broken or fallen apart, or you couldn't get to it. In usual situations, absolutely, the shield would be used in conjunction with the sword, and the design of the sword is very much based on the fact that it's supposed to be used with shields and against other people with shields as well. But this is a sidearm, this is a backup weapon, this is what you wear. So what that brings us to, what are the principal weapons of Viking era warfare? Well, first of all, we shouldn't forget for a moment missile weapons, and that includes bows, the longbow. Some people think of longbows as something of the later medieval period, but in fact the longbow absolutely was around in the Viking era. We have archaeological surviving examples of longbows, full length 6 foot long longbows. So bows were important in the Viking era, and thrown spears were also incredibly important. Occasionally thrown axes, the so-called Francisca, but additionally this type of one-handed axe could be thrown, but thrown spears, and that brings us on to the principal weapon of the entire period. Spears. Okay, you can't underestimate how important spears were. I've got a full-length version here with a head made by Paul Binns, and this type of long spear, generally speaking, used with a shield and used one-handed. It could be thrown, but it was usually used in close combat, either over or under. This type of spear, and there were different types of spears, but the spear absolutely was the most important hand weapon of the period. Here we've got a different type. This is sometimes known in this period as a hewing spear. You'll see it's got a broader, longer head that you can cut and thrust with, use a bit like a glaive or a naginata. And it's also got lugs. This one's a winged spear, and those lugs can be used to push aside opposing weapons, hook shields, hook bits of people, this kind of stuff. So spears, absolutely, despite the fact that we've got bows and we've got axes and we've got swords and saxes and other things around at this period, but we've already now looked at all of the principal weapons in the Viking arsenal. The absolute most important of those, and throughout Europe in this period, used in conjunction with the shield is omnipresent, is the spear. The spear and shield are the de facto, the default, the ubiquitous weapons of the Dark Ages and of the Viking period and of the Vikings themselves. And yes, they used axes, yes, they used swords, yes, they used longbows, but the spear was always the most important weapon at this period. Thanks for watching, folks.